Welcome back to Untethering Shame, the podcast where we confront our deepest insecurities and work together to untangle the knots of shame that hold us back. I'm Kyira Wackett, your host, and I'm thrilled to welcome back our incredible guest, Jennifer Walter. In our last episode with Jennifer, we delved into the complexities of body image and fatness, exploring how societal expectations shape our perception of worth and how we can begin to challenge those narratives. Jennifer, the host of the Scenic Route podcast, brings a wealth of insight and energy to our discussions. She's a sociologist, brand strategist, and designer who blends curiosity, transformation, and mindset work with sociological insights to create brands that are not just seen, but felt. Her unique perspective, honed through her work in Switzerland and beyond, makes her the perfect guest to explore today's topic, shame and self-love. And we are going deep again today. If you haven't listened to episode 1, go there first so you can know just the level to which we are going. This time we're just taking it on and another layer of it because as you'll see through our conversation, self-love not only tackles what we already have talked about, but so many other layers of the self and the way that we connect in the world. So we're going to be talking about what self-love is, how we've come to understand it, what we see it to mean, and what we've seen it to mean in our past selves and through some of our own painful experiences, why the journey to self-love can be so challenging, how our past experiences shape our present, and what it actually means to start the process of loving yourself fully and completely. So join us for another powerful conversation, sure to leave you in that state of reflection and curiosity. Let's do this. Ooh, okay. You ready?
I mean, as ready can be for something like this, but hit me, Kyira, hit me. Bring it on.
I think when you and I were trying to figure out what we would want to talk about next, and you mentioned, and I think I was like, oh, we could talk about, boundaries, or we could talk about ending relationships.
This is so vanilla. Let's
Yeah. And I saw your email come back through and I was like, okay, yep. Like I feel it even now, like there's a little knot like right in the lower part of my throat because I think, there's so much around self-love. People talk about self-love all the time and this notion of it's like positive self-talk and waking up every day and looking in the mirror and it's like unicorns and rainbows and glitter and bullshit, essentially, instead of realizing so much of self-love is about healing all the past parts of yourself that have come to believe that you are unlovable so that you can allow yourself to be seen and to show up fully in the room. And it is, it's just, scary doesn't even feel like it touches it. It's like my brain can't process it in one full sitting because I can't, almost like I couldn't imagine that to be a reality, which is why sometimes I think the self-love sphere seems nauseating to me because it feels so I don't think reductionistic is a word, but we'll go with it.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It has been taken over like almost everything else by like a westernized capitalistic view of like, how can I frame it to sell you more shit?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know. And it's, I don't know. I think one of the persons that I always think of is like Gwyneth Paltrow and Goop and vagina smelling candles, which kudos for her marketing, right? Fair play.
True.
But it's like, yeah, if that candle or that yoga mat helps you to love yourself, then fair enough.
Right.
But at least be honest with yourself that it's just like a crutch and not like whatever you think it is. But yeah. It always makes me gag a little. The whole like self-love, positive self-talk, affirmations, bullshit bingo that's going around.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's like you're just like, oh, it's always like it's just kind of like you be nice to yourself and you treat yourself and like, yeah. That's one aspect of it.
Right.
right? But I feel my definition, what I came to define self-love as, is fundamentally it's about treating oneself with the same kindness, support, and concern you would offer your kid or your best friend, right?
Yeah.
It's realizing when your ego is trying to bullshit you. And sometimes you need a firm hand. And I don't say firm in the 1950s sense of way, where you would like smack your kid around. And that's also where I think a lot of the gentle parenting advice goes amiss, right? It's not with just giving leeway and just being like, oh, you can have whatever. It's fine. It's still, you gotta sometimes be firm with boundaries and where you're like, no, this is the line in the sand. And why do you keep doing that? But I approach things when I'm like, oh, why I keep doing this? I do not want to do this.
This sucks.
This sucks. Yeah, this sucks balls. Like I try to approach it with a sense of curiosity of like, oh, interesting. Why am I doing this again exactly? Because I thought I talked about this shit with my therapist years ago.
Yeah.
And not in a way of like crapping all over myself, of like that thing of where you go like, oh, see, you've done it again, you stupid bitch. Like, you never learn. Bah, 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 and you hammer it out. Instead, I don't know, I recognize and I don't put extra gasoline in the fire.
Yeah. I mean, I think what you said about when you said the word concern, it like really vibrated in me, because I think so much of it, I think about like when I have a therapy client that has a similar maybe struggle on that level of like, I need to set boundaries. I have these unhealthy relationships. People are eroding those things. My communication is, I'm the people pleaser. When I see those overlaps with myself, the way that I show concern and support for that person is so different than the way that I show that to me. And that has driven me crazy for years, where I'm like, I'm the fucking shame resilience therapist. And I am like not setting a boundary with the people that are making me feel shame more than anyone, And so just like, wait a minute, this isn't consistent. And why is that? And I think I started to think a lot about my journey to self-love is learning when and how to stop gaslighting myself into acting a certain way. Because essentially I just like gaslight myself into, no, you want to do this. You're fine. This is what it means to be a good blank, or you can handle this, or it's not that bad. Instead of going, no, this relationship is toxic and terrible and is completely enmeshed with narcissistic tendencies all up in it. And you are enmeshed and codependent, and you are allowed to break out of that. Instead, it's just, well, it's not that bad.
Oh, are you talking about my mother?
Fine. Yeah. I mean, maybe. I don't know, at least 64% of people that listen to that right there pictured a parent in their head as I was talking. And they went, oh, thanks, damn Mom, it. That's what I'm still doing. Yep, exactly. And realizing, I was talking to my husband the other day and he goes, I think a lot about who we're choosing to surround ourselves with. And as we get older, and after having our daughter, I think that made a big difference. I'm sure, we were talking about this offline. Like once we become a parent, we become so fiercely protective and aware of their experiences. And so I started to think about, with my mom or with other people in my life, what am I saying when I bring them into my space? What am I saying about me? What am I saying to my daughter?
How am I when I'm in your space?
That's a big one. If I'm honest with myself, I don't like who I become when I'm around some of those people, particularly around my mom, in the sense of, I get stuck in patterns and the way that I treat myself and the way that I inevitably then react to her, and then sort of the domino of other people is not the person I want to be. And that's not practicing. It's not only just that I'm shitty to someone else. Like that part sucks. I don't want to do that. But at the core, it's that I've chosen not to take care of myself, which then leaves me in a position that I can't show up for anybody else down the road.
Yeah, it's the unconscious decision that you've made in your very early years that your needs are not as important. Yeah. So you try to override them. And I mean, it's this like shitty Pinterest quote of like, oh, you cannot like control like who is in your life, or like, but you can only control how you react to them or something like that, you know? And yes, it's true. Mm-hmm. But for me anyway, there was a point where I'm like, no, you're not going to be in my life any longer, because very similar reasons. I don't like the person I am when I'm around you. I don't like the person I model for my kid. And not having you in my life, yes, it's sad, but I don't want to go back to the way before. Like, something I have changed for the better, and I don't want to go back. And your resilience to change or to simply acknowledge. I'm talking about my mom, so hey. Well, everyone is like, oh, it feels like she's talking about my mom. Yeah, like,
yeah.
It's a mom thing.
It's a mom focused episode on
Like, I like this version of me better, and I owe her a fucking lot. And if you cannot acknowledge that and try to be in my life again, why should I try?
Right. And that, I mean, and I don't know if this happened to you, but what I started to realize is, you know, when we talk about self-love, ultimately working as a way to, I mean, there's no way to stop us from feeling shame. Like, shame is an emotion, it's going to happen. But to sort of dampen the intensity, I noticed that as I was parenting, and I'd have these situations that come up that would leave me at the end of the day, basically, I mean, neck deep in the belief that I am the world's biggest piece of shit mom, and I'm terrible and I am failing. And I would start to really question where some of those standards came from. I mean, at the time, it just felt like, well, because I should have been better. Like, that was, you know, the end of it was like, you should be better. There's a lot of data, again, sort of the capitalistic side of like, there's 8,462 ways that you can learn about how to gentle parent. So you shouldn't have raised your voice. Like, that's on you. But the deeper I got into it, realizing that sometimes the intensity of my shame was less about how Everly would experience something, because it would be minor things. Like, the actual way I reacted to something was like a 1 or a 2, maybe, in terms of like, if I scaled everything I've ever done and like things that like feel like they were my shittiest moments, it was very, very, very low, but my brain would react as if it was a 10. And when I was honest with myself, a lot of the times it was because through my parenting, I was trying to heal parts of myself as a child that I was projecting onto Everly. Like, moments where I would have been rejected, I wasn't seen, and I don't ever want her to feel that way, but it was even deeper. And so then in the moments I couldn't, it was like a double wound, a feeling like I was wounding her, but I was re-wounding me. And then
and you were also grieving missed opportunities or missed situations to be seen.
Yes, on both sides. And realizing that, like, oh my gosh, then that leads you back into a state of a lack of self-love. Because then over time you start to see, well, gosh, there must be something wrong with me. I'm the broken one. I wasn't worth showing up for then, and now I'm not showing up now. And the story, like, our brain is so fantastic at making it an us problem. 1, because then we could control it, which obviously our brain likes to be in control, but 2, because it's just the condition.
The illusion of control.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. The illusion of control, and some desperate attempt to keep ourselves stuck in that space. And so, yeah, you can have a fucking bubble bath, but if you're laying in the bubble bath, you know, recounting every way that you suck and you fail, or you can't even look down at your belly because you're like, I'm so fat and disgusting, I shouldn't have eaten that cookie before I got in the bath.
It's not really self-love.
No. Your bubble bath doesn't mean shit. Your vagina candle isn't doing anything. Like, you're still sitting there hating yourself while you're engaging in these things. And then it still then reduces it to an effort problem. But you should be loving yourself because you're doing all the things instead of realizing that loving ourselves for most of us, I would say, is about really, and I mean, this term reparenting, I feel like is starting to emerge more, but it really is about like going back and meeting ourselves at all parts of our life and recognizing when the shame, the self-doubt, the negatives got introduced and learning how to show up for that you and bringing them along now.
Yeah. Or even, you know, when I look back or even I would have loved to have someone to model for me what it means to self-love, what it means to take care of yourself. And yeah, my parents told me to brush my teeth and like to shower. Yeah. But I mean, that's the very fucking most basic fucking level there is. Right? And then when we look at nourishment, there it already got murky.
Yeah.
With like, oh, you can only eat this candy when you've done XYZ. So we're already labeling food as treats and shit like that. And so you already got murky. But we've never talked about like emotions, like what are emotions? How do we handle emotions? Mm-hmm. It was just always like when there was an emotion, mostly it was like they weren't giving me shit for like happy emotions. But I mean, if you had an outburst, for whatever reason, because you're a kid, you're trying to self-regulate. It's like, like quiet now or whatever, right? And for me, and that is still one of the major fucking issues, I never learned how to self-regulate. So I used crutches like food to help me regulate instead of me self-regulating first and then figuring out what I want to eat to fuel my body. Mm-hmm. And I do it. And I still sometimes when shit hits the fan, I do the other way around. I use food to regulate. And then coming back to this double wound, right? And then I am looking at my kid and how we parent him and how we try to explain what emotions are. Mm-hmm. And him having whatever meltdown for whatever reason, because I probably packed the wrong banana or something for lunch, whatever, like realizing he's just behaving like a typical 1, 2, 3, 4-year-old.
Yeah.
And it's actually me that's the problem. And that double wound of like, and me then going up to him and saying, look, it's okay if you feel upset now. I still love you. Mm-hmm. And then thinking like, man, I don't even know if I could count 5 times where my parents consciously said, I love you or hugged me. Like, I don't think they're even 5 times.
Yeah.
So I'm like, dang, you have it good, kid, and you're ungracious as fuck.
Yes.
So there was triple wound.
There was a Instagram reel that I saw a couple of days ago that was talking about like our parents' generation, their form of guilt and shame was like, in my day, I had to walk, X number of miles to school, or, you kids have it easy. And she's like, our version of it is, in my day, I didn't get to feel my emotions. You get to feel your fucking emotions. And I am just learning it, in my 30s and my 40s. And it was such an interesting take of like, I think, so the reaction you might have when your son has that maybe it's a tantrum, something, you now can go, oh, that's a kid learning how to regulate. You know this logically, but you also go back to your state. I mean, that's when you learned the first reaction to emotions is like, oh no, you shut those down. So you're having this internal battle between what you learned and how you had to show up to be okay in the world with what you want to teach your son. That's really challenging. Oh. And then when you have a reaction, you're like, I'm shitty.
Especially when you're in the midst of the grocery store.
Yeah, right. Yes. And you're like, what? Wait a minute. This isn't, I don't want to be that person. But also like you on some level, it might feel like you're being shitty, but on some level, your reaction to wanting to, essentially shut him up is you trying to protect him because that's what you learned as a kid, is it's safer to not have the feeling. And so now you have to learn how to teach him at the same time that you are trying to show yourself it's okay that I have an emotion now in this moment where I'm feeling embarrassed, angry, annoyed, whatever. And in other situations when I'm feeling these things that I maybe don't even give myself permission to have now either.
Well, yeah, 100%. And it's a lot of like micro actions, right? Like, for example, when I would have an emotion as a kid, the sentence every one of us heard is like, go to your room.
Yeah.
Like, think about what you've done. I mean, seriously, how should like a 5-year-old reflect on what they've done? Like, seriously, I know 40-year-old people who cannot do that ever.
Especially when your brain at 5 is designed to just like move on to the next thing. Like you literally can't hold it, but
No, but right. I mean, you can also not do it when you're like 10 years old. I mean, it's ask a bit much of kid.
That's crazy. Really. I know.
But anyway, I mean, I've experienced it. I'm sure a lot of people listening have also experienced this. And now I will not send my kid away for when he's doing something that I think is triggering me. Again, this doesn't mean he can do whatever the fuck he wants. But what I do, I tell him, look, what this thing you're doing right now, this is very triggering to me. This is upsetting me. So I'll go to the bedroom, take a break, and I'll get back to you. Or you feel free to come and see me when you feel like you need a hug or you want to tell me something. Like that he realizes whatever he's doing is fine. It's okay. At the same time, if you don't have to take other people's shit.
Right.
You can remove yourself from situations.
Right.
You don't have to stick it out.
Right. Oh, I mean, the fact that you just said that, I think is one of the best examples of controlling what you can actually control. And we struggle with this, I think, with kids because, and I have had conversations with friends of mine where, you know, and they kind of believe this of like, well, my kid owes me respect. Like I'm the adult, they're the child. And I'm like, that's really not how human exchange works. And I don't think that's a reasonable expectation.
That is such a foreign concept to me. But I mean, for me, I know I had it with it reminds me of a discussion I had with my mom where we're like, oh, but we'll always be family because we'll be blood. We're blood. And I'm like, I don't fucking care how thick the blood is. Yeah. If you treat me like a piece of, like, what is family worth? Right. If you treat your family, your blood, like piece of shit.
Yeah. You're using that term as a pass to just treat somebody however you want and be like, but it's okay because we're family. And so we'll always be involved. No. And I think about that, like what you do. I do that with Everly too, where something will happen. I will want to try to control her. Stop doing that, or like, this is not okay, blah, blah, blah. And I can tell her that. I can talk to her about her behavior, but in that state of dysregulation, it's not going to do anything. So then instead, what you highlighted is controlling what you can control, which is you can say, I am allowed to take a break. That is loving myself. I am going to take a break right now because I can't be in this position. This is too hard. This is too painful. This is not safe for me. I'm not going to shame my son. I'm not going to send him to his room to think about what he did. He's a, little child. Instead, I'm going to say, this doesn't feel good for me. And the consequence that he is then learning is my behaviors affect other people. And then he can make an informed decision based on the values that he has of, I maybe don't like it when I make my mom feel like shit. And so I don't want to do those things. Not that you're scaring him out of doing it, but he's learning that. And you are learning, I can exit the room. But my guess is you spent a lot of years not believing you could exit the room. Like that was that lack of self, like you took shit, whether it was from your parents, other people, like.
Yeah, like jobs. Like, no. And it was part of like this very ingrained, almost martyr like identity of like, yes, I can still go on.
Yeah.
And I still, like the little engine that could.
Yeah.
But why? Why? Now I'm looking back and be like, why ever? But learning process.
But it's hard. I mean, I think I've been struggling with this as I've been sorting through my relationship with my mom. Like other relationships have been hard for me. Cutting out family, like extended family, making changes in friendships, like that's been difficult, but there is such a like, again, enmeshment, codependent dynamic with me and my mom, I think, and a lot of unresolved trauma. But like one of the things that I struggle with is I'm constantly looking for, like, one of my friends asked me, he's a resident in psychiatry, and he's like, I guess I'm curious why you still have a relationship with her. When you're describing this to me, everything about this dynamic feels psychologically unsafe for you. And I want to understand, you're telling me you don't want to have a relationship with her, but you stay. And I'm like, well, for Everly, I want Everly to have the opportunity to have a relationship with her grandma. And he's like, okay, so what you're describing to me is a person that makes you feel unsafe and lies to you. You don't feel seen, safe, or heard. She doesn't really know you. Everything is sort of on her terms. And you think that's going to look different in her relationship with your daughter. And I'm like, well, no. And he's like, so I want to understand why you still have a relationship. You can have one, but I want you to try to talk through it about what's actually going on. I was like, fuck, I'm using my kid as an excuse, because at my core, it is that same extension of like being the yes person, being that I can still go on.
Yeah.
There's a degree of, I think, martyrdom in the, you can keep treating me like shit and I'm going to be okay, instead of realizing I don't have to be okay. And I think that the layering of the self-love is realizing I'm allowed to choose myself over someone else. And that doesn't make me a garbage human. And that's a really hard belief for people, of saying, because they'll go, oh, it's your mom. Or I had a period with my grandma where we didn't talk for a while. And it was like, but think about this. And it's like, wait a minute. I think it goes back to your family thing of like, just because she's my mom doesn't mean that she gets a pass. Like, that's not okay to do that. But like,
I mean, the thing is, she got many passes.
Ooh, yeah.
She got a fucking shit bucket load of passes.
Ooh.
Right? At least in my case.
Yeah, no, that's 100% true. And I can tell you right now that feels the same as when he said to me, like, basically, you're telling me she's a narcissist, but you still want her in a relationship with your daughter. I'm like, fuck. But it's exactly what you just said. Like, the fact that you just said that is like, how often do we reduce that? I'm 36. And since like major trauma happened when I was 10, so at least 26 years, but it was happening before that. Almost 40 years of passes. And now I am setting a boundary, and I am somehow wiping away the fact that I have had conversations and I've tried for 36 years. And now I'm choosing me, but somehow I'm the asshole.
Oh God. Yeah.
Whoa.
Oh, I mean, I cut ties with my mom like a bit more than a year ago. And that just really, there was a point of no return.
Yeah.
And it was really like, where I'm like, you know what? No. I had enough. And I mean, she threw everything at me, from, you never loved me, to like, I really miss my grandson. I will never see him again. And I'm like, bitch, you've been invited to his birthday party, but you chose not to come. So do with that what you want. But I mean, it was really like realizing, like, look, I'm not standing in the way of my kid having a relationship with his grandma.
Right.
At the same time, I'm not forcing it. Meaning, when my kid, it has happened, I think 3 times in this about like 14 months, 3 or 4 times, where he on his own came and said, oh, I would like to visit grandma.
Mm-hmm.
And then my partner, bless his soul, would take him.
Mm-hmm.
But then he had enough, because she wouldn't engage with him anyway, right?
Yeah.
They would just sit there and he would play and she would watch him, and like he probably would be bored.
Yeah.
But it's really like, I'm not standing in the way. Or even when we look at like photo albums, I will be like, oh, look, this is you with grandma, and you're like doing this and that. Like, I'm not acting as she's like a persona non grata and we're like, just ignore her. But I'm not forcing the relationship on I'm not forcing it. She has to do the work if she wants to be in a relationship with her grandson, period.
Ooh, yeah. Well, and I think that's maybe the layer too for many of us is part of the reason we struggle with self-love is because, I mean, you mentioned that of like being really young and sort of learning to prioritize other people's needs. It's the idea of we've been doing the work or like holding up other people for so long that when we stop doing that, we see it as like we're doing something wrong or we're afraid we're going to be judged. And I think so much of self-love is ultimately saying, now my phrase in my head is not my ball. Like, don't pick that ball up. Like, that's not mine. I'm not going to own that. That's somebody else's. They can choose to play that game. I don't have to.
Yeah.
And realizing what that looks like. And it is this weird, again, we've made our worth and value about how we show up for other people. I do like what you said too of this isn't a punishment or a reaction. This is a necessary boundary. This isn't about making her feel like
she
shit.
will not understand that.
No. And she will take it however she takes it, similar to my mom,
course.
which will always be that this is my fault. I have done this. I am the problem. I am, whatever. She's always going to find a reason why it's me because she needs it to be, because she is interested in staying in that story. Me choosing me is saying, I don't like that. It's like forcing myself to watch, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a movie that I hate, but like watching this terrible fucking movie. There you go. Star Wars. I don't like it. I can't get through one. But I can sit through Harry Potter. Like, I'll switch. I'll go over there. Or if Everly wants to watch a movie, we can watch Wish. I liked that one, but I'm fucking not watching Lion King. I can't handle it. It's annoying. There's like 4 minutes of it that I actually like. And then I just think it's like, it just loses it for me. I don't want to watch it. Or Cinderella or Sleeping Beauty or whatever it is. Like, I don't want to watch that.
I really enjoyed Encanto though.
Me too.
Oh, it was so good.
Me too. And I mean, talk about the art of self-love and healing and the grandma that showed up to do the fucking work. She can do it. She can acknowledge it.
I mean, that's the thing, right? We cannot build relationships like for our parents or for our kids. Like, yeah, they gotta put in the work, especially when they're like 60 plus fucking years old. I mean, I know. If she, for whatever reason, is unable to put in the work for me or for my kid, I mean, yes, it's sad and all. But I'm better now. Like, I don't want to go back to the way things were before. Yeah. I am better on all the different levels one could possibly be better. Right. But yes, of course, everything is my fault. Yeah. She surely has some narcissistic tendencies as well, which are very fun.
Really sounds like our moms would hang out real well together because they would just sit and talk about us in a way of...
Probably. But that's the thing, right? Like, I mean, characteristic for it is for Christmas, she got my kid a pajama, which is fine per se, right? Mm-hmm. But it was a pajama with, I don't know what was on it. Like something very, like, it was really like something like, what? Yeah. And I mean, he is a 4-year-old boy. So if you spend 1 minute with him, listening to him, you would know he either really loves dinosaurs, cars, or Pokemon. Yeah. Right? Or with me, I mean, for years, like not shitting you, for years, she would gift me like bed linen. But she would always give me bed linen that are just fucking ugly. That she would like, the kind she has on her bed. But I mean, it doesn't look like this, but my bedroom is more minimalistic and clean vibes to chill. Yeah. And she would get me these fancy colors and patterns, and I'm like, my brain is already frying. Yeah. And then every time she would come over, I see you don't like the sheets, do you? that I got you for Christmas.
Would you tell her? Like, would you say, no, I don't?
Of course.
Okay.
I told her every fucking time. Yeah. I'm like, also, it's a gift. If it's a gift, what that person does with the gift is up to them. Otherwise, it's an obligation.
Right. My mom's is figurines, and like, I don't like figurines. Anytime I would give feedback, then it was like I kicked a dog. And so then
at least
stopped.
I got you something.
Right. And like, I'm, oh, so you don't like it. But it is so interesting, so we're using our moms as these, like, they're big seeded examples. And it's obviously like they are very raw, very ripe. There's a lot of work there. But if we're honest, I mean, and I'm still in the relationship, and so I can see it when I stay connected there. That tendency, that dynamic, that accepting something I don't like, the not setting boundaries bleeds into every other relationship that I have.
It seeps through, like,
yeah. It's not just, well, okay, it's just here. No, this is everywhere because it's reinforcing the story everywhere. I've had for 36 years. My job is to pick them, not pick me. And it's like, it's not just the gift. It's like, I don't want to say yes to something I don't want to go to. I don't want to say, whatever it is. Like, I don't want to do or to feel or to be that. That's not what I want. And so that, I think, has been the most interesting realization of noticing, like, my process of learning to love myself is about realizing that how I've shown up to this point was a survival strategy that my body and my brain adopted to get through. Yeah. I am now not in those positions where I have a sense of powerlessness or I'm stuck. I have the right to make a different choice. I can validate the me that made those choices, bring her along, and be okay with making a different choice and not absorb some false projection that everyone's going to think that I'm a piece of shit because I don't have a relationship with my mom. And instead realize if that is their perception, they don't know me, which means they can't connect anyways. Instead, it's going,
so who gives a fuck?
Exactly. I can't allow, because that's just another way of practicing people pleasing, just through a different lens.
But at the same time, as what you said, right, it's really important to look back and realize everything I've done as a kid, it was just the only way I knew how.
Yeah.
Right? I shared before, like, I think I can count on one hand how many times I've heard I love you. Mostly what I had to, like, decondition or reparent myself in is that I don't have to do something to be lovable. I am just lovable just as is. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that goes back to like school years, where I was lucky. Like, I just kind of like went to school, got good grades without doing anything much. I always got praise and like, oh, well done, if I've done something that was good in their eyes, like good grades. Right. So it was getting praise or getting any kind of really positive reinforcement was always attached to me doing something good. Right. But not to just me as a person. And that was and is still something to learn, that to be like, no, I don't have to do this if I don't want to, with the hope that they will like me then, or they will love me more. Like, which has to factor in too. I mean, I feel like I'm relearning that even as a parent, because you see when those expectations of like, I have to act this way, be this way, there's sort of a perfection level that comes to that of like being able to hold it up for everyone. It comes into, at least for me, how I've parented, where sometimes my expectations and then the shame that I feel is a reflection of that storyline. Because if I'm being honest with myself, like, I'm a really fucking good mom, not because I'm perfect, but because I am willing to do the one thing that I didn't experience. And again, I don't want to reduce parenting to just one thing, but I am willing to practice humility and accountability, which I think is the most important thing in any relationship. It's not to try to be perfect, but to be like, I want to show up because I love and care about you. And I want to learn
how to show up in the best ways for you instead of assuming that I know what's best for you. And so sometimes I'm going to say the wrong thing. Sometimes I'm going to do the wrong thing. I'm learning as I go too, but I'm going to hold myself accountable to that, own that, and practice that humility with you. And also then not shame myself and not keep trying to build that relationship. And that is a gift I know I can give. But when my shame comes in, it tries to remind me, but you still should be perfect. And so having to unlearn that has been another layer of, I think, the self-love journey as well.
For sure. Oh, yeah. This is something both my partner and I practice with our kid. Like 2 sentences really that sum this all up is, I don't know.
Yep.
Right? Like really standing there and be like, you know what? It's a good question, but honestly, I don't know. Like, let's see how we can find this out.
Yeah.
Like, can we Google it? Do we have to like ask someone? Can we read a book? Like, let's find out. And the other is, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I don't have any conscious recollections of my parent ever apologizing to me for their behavior. The few times I flipped and I raised my voice, once I regulated myself, I would sit him down and be like, you know, I'm sorry. I didn't want that. But as you said, like, I'm learning as I go. You're my first kid. This is my first time rodeo. Like, we make it up as we go.
Right.
I mean, sometimes my only parenting book is like, I'm doing the exact opposite of what my parents did.
Yeah. Right. Which is not how we want to build our parenting plan. But sometimes it's all we know is like, well, I don't want to be them. And so I'm going to do this differently. And I mean, it sounds to me like you've done such a significant amount of work of realizing, okay, I've done these things. Like you said, I've developed the skills that I've developed to survive in my life. And I have to be able to give myself space and grace in that, which is hard. But trying to do that work while also going back and saying, you know, or figuring out this is where and how those were developed, and not to blame or to anchor, but more just understanding the full storyline. And in doing that, starting to recognize, and these relationships in my life are unhealthy for me now. Not just that they were unhealthy then, but they're unhealthy for me now. And so as I'm doing this work, I'm going to start to take ownership, take the pen back and write the story I can write now to shift it so that as I continue on in it, I can enjoy the process of learning and growing and create more of that flexibility in that. I'm curious as we think about, you know, people listening to this. So some people are just going to be like, I want to hear more about these mom dynamics because they're relating. Because I think a lot of people, again, it's especially as we get older.
And you've got boomer parents.
Yeah. And there is this pressure of, you know, but they're old and think about how much time they have left. And what about this? And again, the grandparent thing. And so there is all these sort of external reinforcers of like, you should just tolerate being treated like shit because they're never going to change. And I hate that. And I think that's such bullshit reaction. So there's some people that are just like, I'm here and I'm just in this and I'm maybe even just drawing the dots and recognizing how this is similar to my parents, whatever. But there's some people that are going, okay, so what you're basically saying is that self-love is about this sort of collective healing of your younger self, like all the different iterations of you and yourself now, and then learning how to sort of write your life in the authentic voice for you. I want to do that. Where do I start? And so if you were thinking for you, like when you started this process, because we're both still in it, we're definitely not like, fuck yeah, I got it, I'm here.
There's no peak. There's no peak mountain self-love.
No, so it's just a process.
Yeah.
How did you make that decision? And was there something like that you could pinpoint that was like, this felt like this was a starting point for me, no matter how small it felt in the moment?
The starting point of realizing, oh, shit is fucked up, or starting point of like, oh, I got to change.
I think probably maybe more the starting point of what I'm doing isn't working because what I'm doing is a Band-Aid. So like, again, thinking about the people that's like, but I've gone to the gym and I've changed my diet and I've, put the affirmations on the mirror and it's not working. What allowed you then to go, oh, there might be a different path. Maybe this actually isn't as helpful as I wanted to believe that it could be. And the work might be deeper and harder.
Oh, it's a brilliant question. And I'm like, oh boy. There were many small pieces that probably all in like retrospect make sense.
Mm-hmm.
The combination of work I've been doing because I was realizing, hey, I keep doing the same thing. So like I would stay on the job until the burnout. I would give someone the benefit of the doubt 5 times. Or I would do like a super healthy eating and workout routine for 3 months and then absolutely ditching it and never look back. Or like suddenly realizing, oh, why am I eating this? I'm not hungry. All these little bits and pieces.
Yeah.
And then obviously I had all different kinds of help put the pieces together. Yes, I mean, I also coach people and I also work with people, but coaches have coaches, which therapists have therapists.
Yep.
And I'm not saying this in like a fucked up MLM kind of way.
Yeah. No, but in the sense of like, if you're working with someone who thinks they're above needing to do their own work, that's probably a problem. Like,
oh, that's a big red flag for me.
Where it's like, no, I maybe don't need to always be in therapy, like deep therapy, but sometimes I do need, whether it is that deeper, like right now, as I'm working through this painful thing, or like I need someone else. It's the willingness to accept, I think, what you said about self-love. Like there is no point where you go, well, I fucking love myself. We're done. I did all the work. Like it's realizing like, no, the process of living our most fulfilled and authentic life is iterative and we need support along the way because our brain is programmed to see things a certain way that has been protective, whatever it might be, and it might not be healthy. And so it sounds like you were like, this is all the stuff you're doing. I'm sick of this. Other people are helping me connect that maybe the reason I'm doing this is something deeper. And I don't want to just stay up here anymore. I don't want to be in the superficial. I want to not feel this because this just perpetually sucks.
Yes. And I mean, that was like cognitive work. It was somatic work. It was behavioral work. Like it was all different fields and ranges, right? It was with doctors of psychology. It was with tarot card readers. Like,
yeah,
I mean, whatever fucking speaks to you, you go do it. And there's something you can learn from everything.
Right.
If you work with someone who genuinely cares about your well-being.
Right.
Also being very honest with your own flaws and weaknesses. And as you've said before, like it's not a blame game. That in itself, that regret is pointless because shoulda, woulda, coulda. We don't know.
Yeah.
The problem with regret is we always think the other way would have been better.
Yep.
But we just don't know. It could have been equally or shitty or worse.
Right.
So regret is like, whatever. It's pointless. But the same is going back to like owning your own flaws and weaknesses and like opening up. And now there are some where I can more easily say, yeah. And others like, I'm clenching the back of my teeth. But it goes back to also what we covered earlier, right? The not shitting on your past self. Knowing that you've always done the best you could. And here comes a real kicker. And something that took me a while to work through, but all sorts of therapy. if you extend this principle to yourself that you've always done the best you could, you also have to extend that to your mom and dad.
Mm-hmm. I can feel it in my throat too, which is,
but I think that was a hard one. But
I do think what you just said that's so important is, and this is a thing it sounds like we both try to do with our kids. And I think this is ultimately like the act of loving ourselves and also being in loving, adaptive relationships with other people, which is saying, I can recognize that they have done the best that they can. I can also set boundaries with who they are. And that doesn't make me, I don't have to absolve them of any responsibility because they've done the best that they can. The same as like if
it's not
your
a free
4-year-old,
pass. It's just understanding where they're coming from.
Yes.
And I mean, I knew my grandma, my mom's mom. So, well, I mean.
Right. And giving that like sort of contextual awareness. And I think what you're ultimately saying too is to decenter the self from every other story. Like we were impacted by the way that our parents have and continue to show up, and we are making the best decisions that we can. And we are one part of their story. They've had so many other influences and experiences, and their way of existing in the world isn't all about trying to make us feel good or feel like shit. They are doing the best they can in the context of a full life. And so as we make our choices, it's sort of owning that. And then again, recognizing that validation and accountability can exist in the same sentence. And how do we do that? Like I can own that sometimes I do something shitty without saying that means I'm shitty. I can validate that I'm doing the best that I can and still say that wasn't okay.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, that's very very early linguistic education.
Yeah.
That's what we do with our kid, right? When he comes up and says, I don't know, this happened. Oh, like, I'm stupid.
Right.
Like, no, you're not stupid.
Right.
You're a bright kid who just did something that some people might say is stupid.
Yeah.
But doing something stupid and being stupid are two very different kinds of things.
Right. Right.
Like, oh, but mommy, you're smart. I'm like, yeah, okay, thank you. But also smart people can do dumb shit.
Right.
Like this is not what doesn't exclude the other.
Yeah. And I mean, I think this is obviously we knew this, that like you and I could sit and talk for probably like 24 hours straight and still feel like we could have more to say on any topic. Because
I feel like this is a challenge. Should we do a 24-hour talkathon?
It's the next Netflix, like one of those ridiculous things is, can they have an insightful conversation for this long and see how that goes? And I think the answer probably is yes. I think we could do it. And, so if Netflix wants to come our way, I think we'd be up for the challenge at some point.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think what I love is the way that a conversation with you never feels complete, which is a representation of the work not being complete. Like I don't like when I listen to an episode on, whatever the content is, and it's like, but here's then the 3 things that you do. Here's your final takeaway steps, and here's this part. And it's like, what I like is us just kind of going, and here you go. Sit with it the same way that we are, because it is learning right now. Like you and I are in different stages when it comes to this one aspect of our lives and relationship, but like we're both in this process of learning, okay, how do we validate our emotions? How do we manage our behaviors? How do we hold accountability? How do we also recognize, and I have a client right now who's kind of in this space where she's like, but I've done all the work. So why do I still feel this way? And it's like, because I think you had this idea that there was a mountain peak. Like you don't want to say that because it feels dumb, but your brain had hope that there was a point you'd be at, and you're not. Like that's just not what it is.
And it's probably mixed in with a sense of trained rewarding methodology, right? I did something hard, so now I should get a cookie.
Yeah, right.
Whatever the cookie is now, right? Yep. And it's like, no.
Yeah.
You can have a cookie, if you want a cookie. No one's gonna stand there and cheer you on except you fucking cheer yourself on.
Right. And being okay, I think, when at the end of it, I think what we realize is that the responsibility to create a fulfilling life is on us. It's not that the world is just going to open up and the clouds part and everything is amazing. It's realizing that no, every day there's a conscious decision we make every moment of how we're going to show up to our lives. And that doesn't mean we're going to feel elation and joy and all of that every moment. That's not how our bodies are programmed. We're going to feel all the different emotions, but learning what contentment and fulfillment looks like. And I think at least the takeaway for me as we're talking about this is realizing that as I'm making these big moves that have felt so intangible for a long period of time, it's recognizing that doing that is freeing up the space so that I can continue to do that and I can enjoy parts of my life in a way that I wasn't able to before. Not that then everything's going to be beautiful, but saying life is going to be hard in different ways. What I'm saying now is I get to steer the ship more when I stop engaging in dynamics and relationships that are keeping me tethered to unhealthy codependent dynamics or shame or whatever it is. And so it is, I think, for people listening, I want you to kind of hold that of Jennifer and I don't have figured out fully yet. We know where the process is. We're working through it. And neither one of us is trying to sell you on the idea that you get to a mountaintop. We're saying this is really hard and it's going to be hard in different ways as the context of your life changes. So how do you instead do the work to love yourself enough that you're willing to be that kind of ride or die with yourself in the process instead of expecting that the output looks a certain way?
100%. You got to do a lot of the things that a million times and you're going to be like, hey, but I've done it again and again and why? But you'll always be a different version of you.
Mm-hmm.
You've always learned something. And releasing, for example, my mother relationship has, as you've said, has opened up capacity to look at other things.
Yeah.
Whereas before, there just was no capacity to do that. And maybe if we're gonna throw the one tip your way, the one is start smaller. Start smaller. Way, way, way smaller than you think.
Mm-hmm.
At the beginning, I had this idea of, I'm not gonna do this thing anymore. Right? I love myself more. And then I repeat the affirmations in front of my mirror. And my ego was like, meh, bullshit.
Yeah.
So I had to start annoyingly uncomfortably small. For me, it was like going to the playground that was a bit out of our way, because close to that playground was a pretty fucking good coffee place.
Mm-hmm.
So like, oh, okay, I'm going to go there, although it's a bit more of a hassle, but not so much. Like, it's still fine. Kid loves it there anyway. But the coffee there is great.
Mm-hmm.
It was things like that. Or everyone was like, oh, we want to eat pizza for dinner. And in my head, when I thought about dinner, I was thinking maybe Chinese or Indian.
Mm-hmm. And
then I would be like, oh yeah, sure, pizza's fine, whatever.
Right.
And go be like, no, I actually want to eat fucking Indian again. Mm-hmm. And even if it's the first time this week,
mm-hmm.
It's really start small. Start so much smaller than you probably would want to start at.
I think that's such a beautiful way to wrap for people, because I think their brains are going through this, and wherever they latched in and wherever their brain is kind of running to now, there's always that propensity and that drive. And that's been reinforced by the world around us of like, okay, so now what's the action plan? What's the step? How do I not feel this? Instead of, again, just thinking about one, radical acceptance, you're going to continue to feel this way. The process is not to remove that. It's the way that when everyone's like, well, how do I not feel shame? Yeah, that's not going to happen. You're going to feel it. It's how we respond to it that evolves over time. And so it sounds like, whatever that big overarching goal is, and if it's ever an all or nothing, like I'm never going to do this or I'm always going to do this, like right off the bat, let's say take that down a notch and just kind of saying what's one small way that I could show up for myself, or a way that I could stop silencing myself. Like if you were speaking up and saying, I actually don't like that. For me, it was even being honest sometimes with my husband of like, I don't like this playlist. Can we listen to a different playlist when we're in the car together instead of just tolerating it? And those minor, they seem so, and we automatically categorize them as like, well, that's dumb. That's not that big of a deal. But what we don't realize is, again, how we got to this point was an accumulation of small steps down a different path. So that accumulation of small steps over here puts you back in the process of then starting to love and enjoy yourself on that deeper level. And then it builds you up to the places where, again, it's been 26 years of navigating this very tumultuous, trauma-induced aspect with my mom, and 36 years of, on this earth living with her. I have known I've wanted to set boundaries for at least 15 of those years. And so it was like, okay, I want to do this. I want to say this. I want to try this, and dancing around it. The only reason I can start to set those boundaries now is because I've accumulated 15 years of small steps to start to make the decision of, oh, I don't think I'm going to like this, but I'm more prepared to be with myself in the process. And so as you all are leaving today, I want you to just take that. As soon as, I heard her say that, I'm like, oh yeah, I like this. Start smaller. Pick your one takeaway, your one thought, your one action plan, and then I want you to make it even smaller. Cut it in half, whatever that is. And that is your goal right now. That is your one piece you're going to be focusing on. And once you've done that so many times, it's integrated in the system, it's automatic. Only then do you pick up the next small piece and keep going and realizing that that is the journey. That is the process to what we're doing. Okay, some people have already listened to episode 1. They've heard where to find you. But if people are listening to this one for the first time or just want a really good reminder and they're like, I need more of her in my life, tell them all about the best places to go, including a plug for your podcast, because it's one of my favorites out there. And I want more people to know about it and to come over to that platform too.
If you feel like I want to hear more of her brain farts, then please come over to the Scenic Rap podcast. And I also, by the way, I love how you can take my brain farts and spin them so eloquently. And I'm like, yeah, that's actually what I wanted to say. But anyway, so yeah, we do all sorts of fun and deep conversations on the Scenic Rap podcast, where it's all about living the life, whatever that means. And already give you a heads up, will not give you any blueprints or templates or 4 steps to this is not, we're not doing that. And other shenanigans is mostly on Instagram or TikTok. You can find me in both it's Jennifer Walter or my website, jenniferwalter.me, which is a good hub for everything else. Come hang out.
I love it. And she means it. And that's really just like who she is. And I think these conversations are, and we've talked about this before, but I think one of the things that I love about you is the safety of just, I don't ever feel like I come in a conversation with you feeling like I need to know the answer. I need to get it right. I come into a conversation with you really interested in exploring, and I feel this freedom to process. And so for people that are like, I just want to keep exploring and learning, she just brings this safety into the space with people where the pressure is off. Like it really is just about, it's not just that she's not giving you answers. She's not expecting you to have the answers, because again, that's not the goal. It's about the curiosity and the process of it all. So again, you're going to take whatever your big takeaway, your big reflection is, and then you're going to cut it in half and you're going to say, okay, that's my focus. That's my one thing. You can always come back. Yeah, there you go. Cut it in fourths, eighths, 16ths. I mean, however small it needs to go. And when you're ready, you come back and you listen to the episode again and you see what comes up for you. And then you keep allowing yourself to take those next steps in the process. Always, 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 as you are going through each and every day and week, remind yourself that shame is a natural part of how we are living, how we are existing. Our goal is to just keep showing up and to remind ourselves that we are worthy in this process. And I will see you all back here next Sunday.